What would it mean if the most hated queen in European history left behind a confession so politically explosive that 3 separate governments agreed to bury it? What would it mean if the woman condemned as a symbol of decadence, corruption, and detachment had written, in her own hand, a document explicitly naming the people she believed orchestrated her downfall? People historians have never dared accuse. And what would it mean if inside those pages, between coded affection and censored lines, lay a revelation about loyalty, betrayal, and forbidden intimacy that could dismantle centuries of carefully curated royal narratives? Welcome to Noetera, Hidden Lives, where suppressed history breathes for a moment before the archives attempt to silence it again. Remain until the final whisper of this investigation. And if forbidden truths intrigue you, subscribe and uncover what history tried to seal away. The mystery begins not in the glittering courts of Versailles, but in a temperature-controlled vault beneath one of Europe's oldest libraries, a room where the air tastes like dust and cold iron, and where the lights flicker not from age, but from motion sensors that monitor every movement. Inside a beige archival box, unmarked on the exterior except for a catalog code, nearly impossible to match to any public record, rests a collection of documents whose very existence contradicts 3 centuries of official narrative. Pale ink, faded parchment, scorched edges, and redactions so precise they could not have been made with tools available in the 18th century. These are the surviving fragments of the sealed correspondence between Marie Antoinette and Count Axel von Fersen, the man described publicly as her trusted advisor, but privately something far more complicated, politically dangerous, and morally controversial than the monarchy allowed anyone to admit. Historians have always known the letters existed. What they did not know, what they were never meant to know, is that one of those letters was written the night before Marie Antoinette's transfer to the conciergerie, the prison that would deliver her to the guillotine. A letter that contains whole lines crossed out by an unknown hand, names erased with chemicals that darkened the paper, and a final paragraph that was physically cut out with a razor and replaced by a blank sheet stitched in its place. The question that has haunted archivists is simple: who censored the Queen's last confession, and why? The evidence trail begins with an anomaly, an offhand mention in a Swedish diplomat's notes from 1794 of a fatlali angsagi ng kamiautsang sentipor, tikmun, of a final document from the French Queen, suppressed at the highest level for the sake of European stability. The record gives no details. It merely states it was too incendiary for the present century. How does a private letter become a threat to an entire era? And why would foreign governments cooperate to hide it? The vault documents reveal a timeline built not of certainty, but contradiction. The ink used on Marie Antoinette's original lines matches the chemical signatures of her other confirmed writings from 1793, but the ink used for the redactions does not exist in any catalog prior to the 1820s. That means the Queen's words were censored decades after her death by someone who had access to national archives and by someone who believed the truth she wrote still posed a danger long after the blade fell. Reconstruction of the uncensored passages relies on a mixture of forensic imaging, scattered diplomatic letters, and testimonies left behind by the revolutionaries who guarded her in her final days. Together, they form a mosaic of deeply conflicting interpretations. Some accounts portray her as a broken woman, clinging to illusions of loyalty, Others suggest she died still, believing in a plan she thought would save the monarchy. And then there are the forbidden lines, faint, partially recovered, that hint at a betrayal far more personal than any political conspiracy. One surviving fragment reveals her voice in words trembling across the centuries. The one I trusted above all others, the one whose loyalty was promised to me in blood and in secrecy. The sentence ends there abruptly, but beneath the chemical burn, thermal imaging reveals the faint shadow of a name, one that matches none of the known enemies of the crown. Instead, it resembles the first letters of a man presumed loyal to her until the last moment, a man whose descendants later held key government positions in the early 19th century. If she named him as her betrayer, the revelation would have ignited not only scandal, but a diplomatic crisis between nations still rebuilding after the revolution. Other fragments suggest a deeper, more forbidden revelation, one tied to the Queen's relationship with Fersen. For centuries, biographers danced around the subject, refusing to label what so many circumstantial records imply. Yet here, in the fractured parchment, in the ink strokes of a desperate woman facing death, she writes of the devotion which the world would misinterpret and of affections that no throne could sanction. Historians who have seen these lines disagree violently on their meaning. Some interpret them as coded political trust. Others see them as evidence of an emotional connection that crossed boundaries royal protocol could not acknowledge. The debate swings between innocence and scandal, loyalty and betrayal, with each interpretation challenging the moral narratives constructed around her. In the reconstructed past, the Queen writes from a cramped stone cell lit by a single candle guttering on a metal plate. The walls echo the murmurs of the guards outside. Her pen scratches the parchment with growing urgency. Every sensory detail, the smell of damp straw, the cold seeping through her clothes, the iron taste of fear clings to her writing. She presses the ink deeper into the fibers when she writes certain names, as though trying to carve truth into the paper itself. Every stroke carries the weight of a woman stripped of power, yet still clutching fragments of a story she wants the world to hear. One of the most startling recovered passages reads, "They said my ruin was written long before the crowds took the palace, long before the assembly spoke my judgment. They said a decision was made in private rooms far from France. If what they told me is true, then I was not condemned by my people, but by those who claimed to serve them." What did she mean? Which decision? And who told her this? This fragment ignites the most controversial theory, that foreign powers may have influenced the revolution earlier and more deeply than official history admits. Some scholars argue she refers to misinformation fed by guards to demoralize her. Others believe she was referring to intelligence reports she had access to before her imprisonment. A more taboo interpretation, discussed only in classified academic circles, suggests she might have been referring to a secret meeting between certain French officials and foreign agents recorded in one obscure diplomatic ledger. If she named those involved, her letter could have destabilized fragile alliances for decades. Another recovered line intensifies this controversy. "And so I learned it was not the anger of the streets, but the whisper from the north that sealed my fate." The phrase "whisper from the north" appears nowhere else in her known writings. Some interpret it as a poetic reference to Sweden, where Fersen held significant influence. Others suggest it refers to Russia, whose monarch had expressed sympathy for the French royal family. The lack of clarity transforms every possible meaning into a spark of suspicion. If she believed a foreign power played a role in her death, the implications would shift the narrative of the revolution from a purely internal war to an international chess game. The presence of coded symbols in the margin of one letter complicates the picture. Small, deliberate marks resembling the same cipher system Fersen used in diplomatic correspondence appear beside certain sentences. These symbols draw attention to the most emotionally charged lines. One symbol marks the passage. I was promised protection by a heart that once beat near mine, but the promise dissolved when survival demanded a sacrifice I never imagined. What sacrifice did she mean? And whose survival required it? Archivists who deciphered the cipher believe the marks indicate content Fersen intended to hide or decode later, suggesting he may have been preparing to manipulate the document for political or personal reasons. Yet this remains unproven. The ambiguity fuels endless interpretations, each as plausible as it is unsettling. Observers often describe the sensory quality of these letters as if the paper itself carries emotion. The parchment bears small water stains that might be tears or could be spilled water. The edges appear scorched, perhaps from a candle too close, or perhaps intentionally, an attempt to destroy the document in haste that failed. A faint scent of smoke lingers on some of the pages even after centuries, trapped in the fibers like an accusation. As the investigation continues, contradictions accumulate. The Queen's known writings from her imprisonment depict a woman resigned, grieving, and focused on her children's welfare. Yet here, in these censored fragments, she speaks with sharp clarity about political betrayals and secret pacts. Some historians argue the tonal difference proves the fragments inauthentic. Others claim it reveals a side of her she hid from official correspondence. The debate remains unresolved. A particularly controversial passage reconstructs as, "They will say I fell because I was hated, but those who watched me fall knew the truth. Hatred was only the surface. Beneath it lay fear. Fear of what I knew. Fear of what I might say. Fear of what my silence might protect." This line raises the most forbidden question of all. What could the Queen possibly know that terrified so many powerful people? Her words blur the line between paranoia and insight, between a condemned woman seeking meaning and a political figure aware of secrets she was never meant to understand. The ambiguity is the heart of the mystery. If she exaggerated her own importance, the letter is tragic. If she was right, the letter is catastrophic. Not all fragments concern politics. Some contain expressions so intimate they challenge centuries of royal decorum. Scholars who studied them describe a tone that oscillates between longing, regret, and accusation. One line suggests she confided something to Fersen that he later concealed. Another implies she protected someone whose betrayal crushed her. Each line feels like a confession delivered to a man who symbolized loyalty in her final imagination, whether truly or only in the mythology that grew around them. One reconstructed note, partially scorched, reads, "If I had listened to you, perhaps all would be different. But a queen cannot choose her heart's wisdom over her throne's demands. For that choice, history will judge me more harshly than any tribunal." This single line fuels the most controversial moral debate, whether she believed her private decisions contributed to the collapse of the monarchy. Traditional historians reject the idea. Revisionists seize upon it as evidence of personal accountability she never publicly expressed. Both sides interpret the same line in opposite directions, revealing how deeply the Queen's legacy fractures even modern analysis. Further, in the fragments, she writes of letters she burned for the sake of those still living, hinting at names historians have never uncovered. Who were these individuals? Aristocrats who supported the monarchy, revolutionaries who secretly sympathized with her, foreign diplomats who manipulated her trust? The uncertainty transforms every possibility into a threat to accepted history. One sentence, heavily redacted, reads, "Chao Tingwei." And so I chose silence where truth would have destroyed more than it healed. It is followed by a blank space where the paper was cut out entirely. The stitching that holds the replacement sheet is meticulous, too meticulous to be the work of a hurried, revolutionary archivist. This modification likely occurred years later by someone with tools and training. The blank replacement invites speculation. Did the missing section contain names? A confession? A secret that could compromise powerful descendants? The room in which the letters now rest seems to hum with unspoken tension. Temperature controls maintain a coldness that feels almost ceremonial. The documents appear under dim light, as though the archivists themselves fear exposing them fully. The silence is thick, interrupted only by the faint hum of machinery. The air smells faintly metallic, like secrets preserved in iron vaults. As the fragments are examined, small details emerge that complicate every interpretation. A tiny symbol resembling a teardrop appears beside a line discussing betrayal. A faint fingerprint, too small to match modern researchers, marks the edge of one page. Chemical analysis confirms it dates to the 18th century. Was it Marie Antoinette's? Ferson's? A guard's? The uncertainty transforms the print into a silent witness trapped in the fibers. The reconstructed past bleeds into the present as each discovery destabilizes the accepted narrative. The Queen's final night becomes a collage of candlelight flickering on stone walls, whispered conversations between guards, and a quill scratching furiously against parchment. Every reconstructed detail builds a tension between the woman history condemned and the woman these letters reveal. Complex, fearful, fiercely intelligent, perhaps manipulative, perhaps manipulated. The pendulum of interpretation swings violently. Some experts believe the Queen's final confession reveals she was a victim of political machinations, far beyond her control. Others argue the fragments show she was deeply involved in secret diplomacy, aware of plans and betrayals that later historians sanitized. Still others see in her words the voice of a woman whose emotional entanglements blurred her political judgment, leading to catastrophe. Each interpretation contradicts the others. Each is supported by fragments of evidence. Each raises its own taboo implication. Was she a martyr? A conspirator? A tragic romantic? A political liability? A woman silenced because she knew too much? Or all at once? The letters refuse to settle into a single truth. Every recovered line suggests a different version of her soul. One of the final fragments, so faint it required multiple imaging layers to reveal, contains the most enigmatic line. When they tell my story, they must choose which woman they will remember, but none of them will choose the truth. The line feels like a warning across centuries. A warning not only to historians, but to anyone who seeks certainty in the life of someone whose world was collapsing. From all sides, the question that rises from these letters is not merely what did she confess? The deeper, more disturbing question is, why did generations of archivists, governments, and curators agree the world was not ready to read it? If her words contained only romantic confessions, they would have been sensational, but not politically dangerous. If they contained political accusations, the revolutionaries would have publicized them to justify her execution. If they contained international implications, foreign governments had strong motives to suppress them. But if they contained all of these emotionally charged revelations, intertwined with political betrayals and coded truths, then her confession becomes something unprecedented, a document too human for monarchy, too scandalous for politics, too ambiguous for history. The narrative returns to the present. Artificial lights hum softly. Gloves meet parchment with reverence. Digital scans glow on cold screens. Every recovered word carries the weight of centuries spent in silence. Research teams debate, deny, defend, dismiss, and resurrect interpretations with fervor. The air feels charged, as though the pages themselves resist being understood fully, as though the Queen's final voice remains partly concealed, even now. The final uncertainty emerges when, comparing the surviving fragments with contemporary diplomatic papers, in one diplomatic note from a foreign minister, there is a cryptic comment. The French Queen left a testimony which, if known, would complicate the histories we are constructing. The phrasing is telling. Histories we are constructing, not recording, not observing, constructing. The implication is staggering, that historical narratives were curated consciously to shape national identities, and that her testimony contradicted those goals. The reconstruction of her last confession ends not with resolution, but with possibility. The Queen's final words hover between revelation and myth, between emotional truth and political illusion. Each scholar who reads them walks away with a different conclusion. Each conclusion reveals more about the interpreter than about the Queen. In the end, what remains is not the truth of what she meant, but the truth of what was feared, that a single voice, speaking at the edge of death, could threaten the structures that defined Europe for centuries. Whether her confession was a revelation of forbidden love, a denunciation of political conspirators, or a final attempt to reshape her legacy remains uncertain. But the intensity of the suppression, the precision of the redactions, and the secrecy surrounding the letters all point to one undeniable fact. Someone believed her final words could still ignite fire long after her execution. Whether these fragments form the outline of a forgotten truth, or whether they are simply echoes of a doomed woman's last attempt to impose meaning on chaos, is for the listener to decide. The pendulum of interpretation rests not in the documents, but in the mind that interprets them. Perhaps the truth lies in one of the contradictions. Perhaps it lies in all of them. Or perhaps, as she herself wrote, none will choose the truth at all. If forbidden histories and hidden voices compel you, subscribe to Noetera Hidden Lives and continue exploring the secrets the past tried to bury.